The Hero Billboard chart is an event that happens twice a year in the My Hero universe and ranks Japan's heroes based on a few factors: the number of incidents the hero has resolved, their contributions to society, and their popularity with the general public. These factors mean you don't necessarily have to be crazy powerful to be, by definition, a good hero. There are a lot of iconic heroes in their universe, but none nearly as iconic as Spider-Man. Peter Parker is a man that needs no introduction, so the real question is, could Spider-Man become My Hero Academia's #1 hero? Ever since Spider-Man swung onto the scene in 1962, he's done so many things that it's tough to keep tabs on everything he's accomplished. To keep things simple, let's look at a really clear-cut instance of the amount of people Peter Parker has saved during his time as Spider-Man. Despite being a relatively small-scale hero, would you be surprised if I told you that Spider-Man was responsible for saving the lives of 6 billion people in a single incident?
Actually, it was over 7 billion.
Okay, cool. With the help of Black Widow and Silver Sable, Spider-Man managed to thwart Dr. Octopus's scheme to accelerate global warming and destroy Earth. Almost the entire world, including S.H.I.E.L.D., opposed him, and yet he managed to pull through and save everyone. Now, in the context of incidents resolved, this would only count as one incident. But tell me, do you think this one incident is equal in importance to stopping a robbery? Exactly. Incidents must have some kind of worth when it comes to the ranking system. There is no convincing me that a hero that has rescued 6 million different cats from trees is more of a valued hero than someone like Spider-Man, who, on one occasion, literally prevented the end of the world. There are many other smaller instances of Peter saving people and resolving incidents, notably smaller than the end of the world. However, this one does just kind of sum up how capable he is. Don't let that fool you though. Most of his incidents resolved take place in New York. He isn't some kind of worldwide hero, and he isn't responsible for the stuff that happens outside of New York and, at a stretch, outside of America. With this in mind, even though he did have a presence in America for some time, All Might operated in a very similar way. He wasn't jumping continents to save someone in Brazil, he was barely even doing that in Japan, hence why he spent so much time inspiring others to become heroes too. The previous #1 hero, All Might, and the current one, Endeavor, don't have exact numbers when it comes to the people they've saved, just certain instances. Most villains in the series don't have any world-ending attempts under their belt, and generally speaking, that's not really the goal of anyone other than Shigaraki. Thanks to multiple mentions of the amount of people Spider-Man has saved over the years, hand in hand with how active of a hero he insists on being, to the point where it even destroys his personal life at times, I'm led to believe that at the very least he's comparable to Endeavor, who is said to have the highest record of cases solved in his universe. Except Spider-Man has more cases of preventing things much more sinister than stealing powers or recreating society. As far as my knowledge goes, we haven't seen Endeavor fight anyone hellbent on blowing Earth to pieces, nor have we heard of many villains that would pose a genuine threat to society like the Paranormal Liberation Front do. With those instances in mind, I think it's a safe bet to put Spider-Man in the same kind of incidents resolved bracket as some of the higher tiers. If not, probably above them. We'll never have any exact numbers, but if we take Spider-Man saving 10,000 people in his career as a fact, and count them as individual incidents, 10,000 cases solved is pretty impressive. This number doesn't account for anything else he would have done past issue 12 of Marvel Knights Spider-Man, which was released in 2005. I think you'd have a hard time arguing that Spider-Man has resolved less cases with less importance than anything All Might or Endeavor had done, despite how incredible those two are in their own right. Unsurprisingly, Spider-Man has some pretty non-standard contributions to society, which give him a very favourable edge when it comes to his competition. Peter Parker is one of the greatest minds in the Marvel Universe. Reed Richards himself calls Peter a genius, and claimed that he had the same IQ as Reed did when he was Peter's age. On top of that, Hank Pym, the scientist supreme, even acknowledged his intelligence, and said that Peter was more... Sorry, wrong panel, easy mistake. And said that Peter was more intelligent than he is. Because of his genius-level intellect and his unwavering insistence on helping people, Peter Parker has done A few things, to say the least. One of his inventions for Horizon Labs, which I believe to be the most important one for them in the context of contributions to society, is a box that's used to deliver emergency transplant organs and feet. Objectively speaking, this is a huge medical development. We see it used to reattach part of the leg of a firefighter that's had the lower half frozen off by Equinox. The doctor that Spider-Man speaks to about it explains they have an excellent chance of reattaching the limb and that he couldn't tell the amount of limbs and organs they've saved thanks to the cryocubes. Even though he has made other things for Horizon, like motorcycle helmets that lower head trauma cases, Peter has really changed lives with his biggest contribution, Parker Industries. Though this was started by Otto Octavius in Peter's body, Peter upheld the company when he was back in control. Full transparency, a lot of the stuff created by that company is either equipment for Spider-Man or only affects people with very specific conditions, but the stuff unrelated to that is really hard to look past. Parker Industries had a huge focus on nanotech, and some of their biggest projects were creating body part replacements. Examples of this being Aunt May's hip replacement that fixed her walking problems, and giving Flash Thompson a fresh new pair of legs to move about on. Considering there were 5 locations in America, and 43 across the entire world, the amount of good Peter and his team would have done without seeing it would probably blow his mind. It goes without saying, technology like that is life-changing. It feels unfair to compare. These kinds of developments haven't really been seen in the My Hero universe. Like, at all. The fact these kinds of contributions are coming from a hero of all people makes it pretty apparent that Spider-Man could offer so much to their society on top of saving lives, stopping crimes, and helping the less fortunate. Spider-Man hasn't always been the most popular in the Marvel universe, though over the years, the menace image has shifted into quite the opposite. Peter is very popular with the public, fellow heroes, and villains? Now, obviously, he isn't popular with everyone, but you can imagine they're the minority when compared to his supporters. Due to how active Spider-Man is in New York, it's almost impossible to avoid him and his infectious charm. Though not really a positive, the fact that Spider-Man has been the Daily Bugle's headliner since the beginning of his career is very important to his popularity. Negative publicity is still publicity, and the mystery surrounding him is sure to attract people for the better or worse. That being said, the Bugle does do some good too. In one instance, prompting Peter to visit his biggest fan, Tim Harrison. Even though the Bugle seemed to use it like a test, it undoubtedly did some good. For those unaware, Tim was terminally ill, and thanks to the newspaper's reporting, he got to spend some time with his hero Spider-Man before passing away a few weeks later. There's another instance of this with another boy named Nathan, who also suffered from cancer. After the hospital reached out to him, Spider-Man spent the day with Nathan, even taking him out into New York, which might actually be one of the most tear-jerking final pages of any comic I've ever read. Peter tends to do a lot like this, showing that he understands that something small to him could mean the world to someone like Tim and Nathan. His deep understanding of people in general is arguably what makes him such a popular figure in his universe. He's a really easy person to rally behind because of how pure his intentions visibly are. Cable even states that in the future his legacy is to be the greatest hero of all. Wholesomeness aside, it would not be a popularity discussion without the mention of consumerism. Though it isn't a focus of Spider-Man's because he's always financially struggling, it seems that companies have made merchandise of him. Examples vary, but it definitely does exist. Though here is where I think Spider-Man loses to All Might. All Might spent most of his career marketing himself to inspire others, whereas Spider-Man just kind of does this naturally. This isn't a critique of either, however, in the context of their universes, All Might is definitely more popular than Spider-Man would be. It doesn't appear that anyone really opposes All Might like the Bugle does with Spider-Man. The people that oppose All Might typically just oppose heroes in general. However, this is not the end of the popularity argument. The Hero Association does quantify the importance of incidents resolved. The large incidents, like saving the world, would go towards Spider-Man's approval ratings. How exactly they would put numbers on that, I don't know. This is where Spider-Man overtakes both All Might and Endeavor. Spider-Man is too fast, too active, and too successful to lose out on approval ratings to his competitors. For every incident Endeavor resolves, Spider-Man has already resolved 3. Whether they like him or not, the citizens of Earth are never going to forget the fact that Spider-Man saved the world. Those approval ratings are going to stick for as long as he lives. So, he'd be the greatest hero to ever live? Right? Statistically speaking, on the rankings, Spider-Man is hard to defeat. Physically, though, kind of a different story. For fairness' sake, we're going to be looking at the villains on a relatively equal playing field. I'll be basing encounters with villains on the visual and contextual scale from Spider-Man and the Rogues in their source material. So while not one-to-one, there are still a few comparisons that can be made. Don't get me wrong, Spider-Man is more than capable of beating most people in the My Hero universe, but there are exceptions. Like most pro heroes, at some point he is going to come across a Nomu. These creatures hit a point where they are indescribably powerful and sometimes require multiple people to defeat. Even some of Japan's most destructive heroes struggle with the high-end Nomu. So how does Peter deal with one? First, we need to set some kind of scale. I'm just gonna say it, Spider-Man is not reaching the same heights as All Might and Endeavor. He won't be generating tornadoes with punches or vaporizing anything anytime soon. Spider-Man is way more likely to share similarities with someone like the rabbit hero, Mirko. Her quirk gives her the attributes of a rabbit, including enhanced speed, strength, acrobatics, and most notably the survival instinct of a rabbit that alerts her to nearby danger. Sound familiar? I thought so. Mirko was able to fight multiple Nomu, and despite being critically injured by the end, she managed to discover their weakness and kill one. Spider-Man should have an even bigger advantage in an encounter like this, considering his spider sense predicts danger instead of just helping him react to it. And if you're questioning Spider-Man's strength in comparison to Mirko's, he has similar showings and often has to hold back because he's so much stronger than everyone around him. The only way to truly stop a Nomu is to kill it, and as we all know, killing is against Spider-Man's moral code. However, there have been exceptions. The closest thing to a Nomu Spider-Man has had to deal with is a Gamma Zombie consisting of 13 Mafia bosses and lieutenants called Digger, or the Vegas 13. Spider-Man beats this monster to death and makes it very clear that he will kill what he already considers dead. Tiny little editing note, because I don't want people to think I'm, hiding information. In the same issue that introduced Mark in 2022, Spider-Man meets Digger again, and says something along the lines of, "I didn't kill you, I dissolved you," or something, when Digger calls him out for killing all of them. And I don't know what the goal there was. I feel like it was very apparent that Spider-Man did need to do something about Digger all those years ago, when he first appeared, or when they first appeared, I guess, because there's 13 of them. I don't know. I guess the writers are just trying to take down everything to do with Spider-Man at this point. His relationship, my argument, whatever. I don't even know, man. I think this whole thing's silly. Trying to make out like Spider-Man wasn't trying to kill this zombie. That was trying to kill a bunch of people. I don't know. I don't think there was any point in elaborating on oh, he's so good, he wouldn't kill a zombie. I think that's stupid. I think that's dumb. But yeah, I just wanted to include that. Maybe a pointless note to some people, but I want to make sure, I have done my research, I promise. I'm going to shut up now. See you. Nomu are no different. They are weaponized corpses that are being used as soldiers by the Paranormal Liberation Front, leaving very little doubt that Spider-Man would destroy them to protect the innocent. How quickly he beats one depends on the quirks the Nomu he's fighting has. Generally speaking, Spider Sense should alert him to danger before anything happens, meaning avoiding their attacks should be relatively simple, unless a quirk is a direct counter to the thing Spider-Man can attack with or use. He's more than capable of putting down a Nomu eventually. Now this leaves the remaining characters, and it would be really easy for me to sit here and say,
well, Spider-Man would just create something and defeat these villains.
And that really wouldn't be wrong, since he does do that. but I think taking that approach is either a cop-out or a really long-winded explanation as to what he'd make or how he'd make it. So here's how I view Spider-Man's interactions with the remaining villains. He isn't unstoppable, but Gigantomachia might as well be. You can stop him, though it is only temporarily, since he's actively leaving holes in mountains and flattening multiple cities at a time. Spider-Man can only really provide support like Best Jeanist, who managed to restrain him with his fibers, which should be notably weaker than Spider-Man's webs. It'd take a lot of webs, but in theory, he should be able to restrain the giant until he just manages to fight his way out. Darby is someone he could potentially defeat, though it's hard to make much of an argument when the fire he produces is hot enough to affect the climate in another country. Even as a child, Endeavor noted that Darby's flames were greater than his own, which tells me that Darby vs. Spider-Man might not end positively at all. Heat-resistant webs only go so far, and making a wrong move against Darby is likely to result in incineration. It's important to note that his webs are heat-resistant to a very certain degree, and he has fought heat manipulators before, specifically Firebrand, who caused an explosion that melted steel and gave Peter third-degree burns across his entire body. Once treated in hospital, Spider-Man recovered and was fighting again in just over a day, but Darby is capable of burning much hotter than the explosion Spider-Man was in, and the fact his range is massive makes it difficult to just say he can dodge it. Now, Hawks was able to survive Darby's flames, so with the right approach, I think it's very possible that Spider-Man could win, though entirely dependent on how serious either character is. I'd assume Darby takes this in most circumstances. Shigaraki and All for One, however, it doesn't look good for Spider-Man. These two are very different, but the outcome is all the same. It's unlikely he's going to make it out alive if he attempts to fight the symbol of evil or his successor. I'm pretty confident in saying he could hurt Shigaraki, and that brings up a glaring issue. If he's close enough to hit Shigaraki, he is way too close and runs the risk of becoming Dust Man. There isn't really much of a counter to the decay quirk, and Shigaraki can do way more damage with way less effort. On the other hand, he isn't damaging All for One at all. He was blocking and surviving serious punches from All Might and didn't die when he hit him with the United States of Smash, which was All Might's strongest attack. We've already established that Spider-Man isn't going to be hitting as hard as All Might or Endeavor, so we can just write him defeating All for One out of the equation. Even if that wasn't the case, All for One can reflect impacts back at the person attacking him, and in some circumstances, forcibly activate people's powers, meaning he could potentially randomly trigger Spider Sense or force Spider-Man to stick to surfaces when he doesn't want to. It's best for Spider-Man to leave All for One and Shigaraki to the heavy hitters. That would be the smart thing to do. But that isn't easy for Peter Parker. He isn't always logical in his thinking. If the situation called for it, he'd lay his life on the line to protect even one person if they were in need. Though he'd mostly be outmatched by the previously mentioned villains, none of them can compare to the mental and emotional powerhouse that is Spider-Man. Sacrifice is such a small obstacle to our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. No matter the strength or size of the villain in front of him, you can count on Spider-Man to try his absolute best to solve that situation. And that is what makes him the #1 hero.